Hello, everyone, and I'm very excited to share with you. This is the last lecture of the program, and it's a lecture that was requested by the students. A big part of the brief is to create a session for refugees and displaced people wanting to become a change making or support change making practices within their own communities. And it was a big question of what we mean by change making. And also, how do we teach for change making, and how we do change making via design, and how we teach design for change making. So this lecture is made in response to these questions, and I'm glad to introduce you with Dr. Silvia Grimaldi. She is the reader of the MA Service Design LCC, and we work together in this collaborative challenge. We have been working together for the last 2 or 3 challenges. And yes, we put this together with some examples that are come from the MA, but also the Service Futures Lab, and some of the work that we have done in the past as an example. So with you, Silvia Grimaldi.
Hi. One second, let me see if I can actually go to the next slide. It looks like not. Here. Okay, so I'm going to talk you through a few projects that I've worked on in the last 5 years. And I'm going to start with a project that was specifically about training change makers. And this project was called Co-Design Your Place. It was an Erasmus Plus funded project, and it involved partners in the UK, Poland, and Denmark. And the idea around this was to create a program to train young people in local areas to do more user-centered, more engaging with the public around placemaking. So the project started with an opportunity, and the opportunity was this park and palace complex in, forgive me because I'm going to pronounce it completely wrong, Siemianowice in Poland. This was a palace that had been abandoned, then cut up into tiny, tiny housing units, then abandoned again. And it is at the center of the city, next to a big park. And the entire complex, the palace, the park, had been abandoned, closed down, not accessible to the public. And there was a foundation that acquired the palace with a deal with the town, which was they would be able to develop the palace for partly commercial and partly social activities. And it had to be in collaboration with the local community. So one of our ex-students was the sister of one of the people that ran the foundation, and decided to kind of help this project along by getting a group of students from the MA Service Design and sending them over to Poland and start experimenting with some of the service design methods that we were using on the masters, and using them in this placemaking context. And out of this, we then applied for Erasmus funding for a following phase of this project. And I'll just show you some of the video in the background. So I'll put the volume down. So our project involved 3 locations, again, London, Poland, Denmark. The partner in Poland was the foundation that owned the palace, and the partners in Denmark were an innovation house for students who were very interested in doing multidisciplinary projects with different types of students. And so we decided to create a program that had workshops in the 3 locations, did a project in each location, and then culminated with us putting together the methodology into a kind of toolkit, and then creating an international conference as well as a series of workshops. And the idea is that people who could not attend the program could then actually attend the conference or attend some of the workshops or use some of the materials that we created so that the effect of this and the impact of this program would be multiplied. So throughout the program, we worked with the group of about 30 young people who were recruited in the 3 countries. And we had a series of workshops going from looking at service design methods and ways of kind of researching the local community and co-designing with the local community. We then used some speculative methods and looked at envisioning futures and how we might do that within a co-design type of environment. And then the final workshop was around business principles. So how do you take a business idea and scale it up and apply it? And so this program was 2 years. It was delayed a little bit before because of COVID, and some of the travel that was meant to happen didn't happen. So the 3rd workshop ended up being online and the conference ended up being online, but that was the restriction of COVID. Let me see if I can go to the next slide. So yeah, we really wanted to make the most of kind of understanding how to use different methods within a placemaking context. And what was really brilliant about this was that one of the partners, the Polish partners, ended up working a lot with the local government after this project, based on this project and based on the methods that they were using. So it really kind of changed the way in which placemaking was done in the local area. This is the timeline of the project. And we selected the change makers in this program. We wanted to make sure that they already wanted to make a difference and wanted to be active in their local community. And also, you know, this was identified by the initial group of change makers as something that we should do. And yeah, I think I've talked about this already. So the other kind of big pedagogy project that I've been involved in has been designing the MA service design. And I like to talk about this as a design project because this master's has been running for 15 years now in different shapes and forms. I took over the master in 2017. And it was due a revalidation. And a revalidation is something that happens every 5 years in UK universities. And what we do is we consult very widely across the spectrum. So with students, with other academics, with academics from other universities, with people in industry, in our field, with ex-students, etc. And then we make sure that the program is up to date. We rewrite it, we change anything that needs to be changed, etc. So this was a really nice opportunity to take this course that had been running for a long time and really make it into what we, the team that was teaching on it at the time, wanted to do with it. But yeah, I got a little bit ahead of myself there, but this is the slide for that. And the first thing that we did was kind of write a definition of what service design is. That was really what we wanted to teach as service design. And so we came up with this definition. Service design is a design-based, human-centered discipline which concerns itself with designing services in the public or private sector, working in participative, iterative, and qualitative ways with all stakeholders, and considering the wider systems at play. And then we wanted to make sure to include that this course has a long tradition of doing projects with local government, with communities, and projects that provide social value, really. And that was what we were focusing on without making it explicit before. So in this, we were able to make it explicit, partly because of politics and partly because of kind of being able to have the evidence of many years of doing this work. And so the second part at LCC, we're committed to working on projects that provide social value. We endeavor to give a voice in projects and outcomes, not only to clients, but also to a variety of stakeholders and users that are affected by the project. And we already talked about participatory and co-design methodologies, but also I think one thing that is really unique and we wanted to really make the most of was that we use qualitative and in-depth approaches to research with a very much an anthropological and ethnographic basis to it. And we use iterative approaches, so we're within a design school. So we prototype, we make, we test, we get feedback from participants. And one of the things that is unique about this course, and again, we wanted to make more of, was underlining the fact that we do projects with multiple stakeholders. We do projects with, for example, local authorities, charities, and businesses all working together on this project. And we really kind of embed the students in with those stakeholders. So the students don't only get briefed about from the stakeholders or from the partners or clients, but they get briefed. They then get a lot of expertise in the form of specialist lectures or talks, and then they get feedback sessions, they get crits, and then they might get co-design opportunities with stakeholders in small groups or in larger groups. And then they present their final projects and get feedback on the final version. And then the last one is we use design to communicate our projects. And this was really coming out of the fact that service design tends to end up buried in reports that no one will ever read. And one of the things that we wanted to be sure it was that we were working with local communities, we were working with participants, and we weren't extractive in the way in which we were working with those participants. And one of the aspects of not being extractive was present the project back to people in a way that was engaging and easy to understand, and they could talk about it to other people as well. So we started doing a lot more exhibitions, we started doing a lot more films, and really different ways of communicating to different audiences. And this is from a paper that me and Male and Lara Salinas and other members of the team wrote for the Service Design and Innovation Conference in Rio de Janeiro last year. And we were really interested in writing a paper that detailed the way in which we work with stakeholders, because there was quite a lot of structure that we had created to work in this way. There was quite a lot of work that we did that was not surfaced in any way within an academic context that allowed us to do these types of projects. So this paper talks about really how we do both education for the students, teaching and learning, but also how we do knowledge exchange with it anytime we work with an external partner that is not part of academia, and how we make impact for those partners or communities, as well as how we fit research within that as well. So how do we co-create knowledge with communities that we're working with? And this is really at odds with kind of the way in which academia in the UK has been run in the last couple decades, which is very businesslike. And so really it's difficult to navigate how to run these types of projects within the context of UK academia. And we started from a reflection about the fact that kind of early service design education was very much focused on the tools and the methods, and it was really about kind of teaching students how to, for example, do journey mapping or personas or blueprints. And this often overlooked the fact that these projects are really complex. And it's more important that students understand why they're using this tool. What does this tool surface? What will it give them? So if they're journey mapping, what is that making clear? Who is it making it clear for? Who is involved in that journey mapping? So all of these questions that are around the why we're using these tools are questions that we felt were a lot more important than kind of how to use the tools. And yeah, this underlines, the second paragraph underlines the fact that we really wanted to make sure that we did present students with the messiness of service design that comes from doing projects with a lot of stakeholders, a lot of partners, public sector, private sector, etc. And so we went back and kind of looked back at the principles that we'd been using to design this course. And one of the first principles is learning by doing. and making sure that the projects are set in real-world settings, and it allows the students to kind of navigate the complexity of these projects, the complexity of the discipline, and understanding this complexity and being at ease with the fact that there is this complexity is a really important thing for a service designer to do. And then taking an asset-based approach. So making sure that who should be involved in the project is involved, who benefits from the project. We understand who benefits, how they benefit, and we also understand what is already on the ground. Do we need to come in and reinvent something with a shiny new invention, or are we really just kind of giving a little push to this thing that was already there, or rearranging things so that these things can work better together? One of the things that has been really contentious within the context of kind of a monetized UK university framework is that we try to work with Creative Commons frameworks. So in that way, the project's outputs and outcomes can be co-owned by the participants. And that means that if any of the participants or the groups of students or any of the individual students want to take these outcomes and take them forward and develop them and make them happen and make them real, they're able to do that. Obviously, that is at odds with frameworks around kind of universities selling the IP for work that has been generated within the courses. So this is something that we've had to really carefully navigate. And finally, we create space for the students to experiment and learn and fail safely. And I think there is a really kind of fundamental issue with when there are projects with external partners or clients who come into a university and commission a piece of work of the students. And then the students are made into kind of consultants, but they're not really paid enough for being consultants, but they're expected to deliver this piece of work for the partner. And what we wanted to make sure was that we created the frameworks for this, the value for the partner coming out of the assembly of the academics working on it, the students working on it, and all of the different projects, but not coming from an individual group of students delivering the project that had been paid for, basically. So we developed a series of framework and tools to reveal these tensions and kind of facilitate the way in which we do these projects. So the first project, learning by doing, project-based learning, and design justice is very much intertwined into this. And this is really in line with ideas of critical pedagogy, Freire, and kind of where the educator is coming in and setting the space and the problem to facilitate the learning, but the action comes from the students' agency, and the students have agency over their own project. The project that you see here pictured was a project called Good Help for Families After COVID. And it was with a group of 20 parent changemakers, as well as a group of, I think it was about 43 students across 2 courses. And what was difficult to navigate in this was that we wanted to give parents the agency of their project and students as well the agency of the project. So parents worked with a few interns within Camden Council who were ex-students of the course to design a manifesto of what good care would look like. So that was kind of on a policy level. And then the students from the 2 courses came in and mapped the entire system, and then worked with the results of the manifesto to prototype some service interventions. So basically the students had the brief. If we made this manifesto real, which has all the principles of what good help might look like, how would the services change within this area? And each group had to really have agency over their part of the project. So in this kind of the principles that we were using were, the why was we want graduates to understand the complexity of service design in real world setting. And kind of the strategies that we used was involving students as stakeholders of live projects to teach and learn while researching in collaboration with external partners. The second principle meaningful engagement, non-extractive practices, and also designing and equipping participants for meaningful collaborations, considering ethics and power relations. And this was, we're using the example of the same project that I talked about before. And the principles from a pedagogical perspective was that we want graduates to have a clear understanding of their role and power within an ecosystem, and to also understand services as social technical systems that are complex. And what we had with this project in particular, which was brilliant, was that the head of the family services from Camden Council had come to us and said she wanted to do a project to reimagine what all of the services would be in the future. And she really wanted it to come from a design justice point of view. And having that underpinning really the relationship with the partner was a really great way to surface all of this stuff within the project. And how, the strategies that we used, using design methods to understand active narratives, values, and stories that may offer arrest power to stakeholders, and also surfacing the infrastructure work and identify its contribution to research and knowledge exchange. There was a lot of work that went on behind the scenes in setting up this project. It was during one of the complete lockdowns in the UK, so we quickly had to change everything to online. The parents had to be equipped with laptops. They then had to be trained on how to use the laptops. They then had to be trained on how to use Miro, which we were working on. And, we were working with children in the background of every single one of the 25 calls that were online at the same time. So, there was quite a lot of infrastructuring work that was going on in setting up this. Male, did you want to talk to this one?
Yes, hello. As Silvia was saying, we wrote together this paper thinking about the principles that inform how we teach for Changemaker in the Masters. And in the presentation in Brazil, I was presenting this section. It was about pluriversal perspective. And this really comes from my reflections working in the Global South. And is how do we align the expectations, aim of partners, so the partners or the stakeholders or the communities or the organizations that work with us are not clients, and neither the students are consultants, like Silvia was saying, and also how we parachute in students in the complexity of the projects. The project is oriented in social value. Many times we're working with vulnerable communities. So we're thinking a lot of what are our right to bring students. The majority, 99% of the students of our masters come from different parts of the world, and they are not familiar with the London context. So how do we bring the students that maybe just landed in London to collaborate and co-design together with communities that probably are vulnerable or are busy or are facing difficult or systemic projects? And then how the learnings from this experience can have a value not just in London, but somewhere else. Because we're working in projects that are really informed by Westernizing values that we think they're positive, but that they are not reality in other places. For example, the idea of democracy, the idea of freedom, the idea of the individual rights to things, the idea of individual access to services. There are things that are very, very embedded and understood as being truth and positive in London, but our students may go back to countries where that is not the case. So these are tensions that are woven into the design of this project, how we teach for that, how we surface these tensions as possibilities for teaching and learning. And again, we always thinking with the dangers of extractivism. Our students we are going to take a degree. They are going to contact and engage and co-design and participate in dynamics with communities, and they are finishing with a degree, but the community, what is left for them? So thinking about value sharing and production for all the people involved is a big tension for us. You want to? So yeah, this was the principles of pluriversal perspective, and about having clients, and the dangers or the tensions about one-off projects, and we have the strategy of using the asset-based project approach. And this is one of the approaches that we're using for our debrief on Transition Living Labs. So thinking about what is working and how can we expand and replicate that, rather than thinking what is the need and come from the outside and trying to sort. So this is something that we're also bringing into this project this time. And then doing research and infrastructure projects before the students come in, and how we engage the users meaningfully so they also have value. In this particular project, we are engaging with organizations that are NGO, working very underfunded, with very little capacity in terms of the people that work for them. Some of them are refugee-led. So how is that we offer benefit to these organizations, and instead of taking the capacity and the time that they have is the main resource and they have very little, and actually produce benefit for all. So these are things that we have in mind when we plan this teaching for change making.
And then another principle is that the students are key stakeholders themselves. So students need to have ownership of the experience. And even though the tutors support the project, the students need to be responsible for kind of the ownership of the project. And so we want to make sure that students kind of facilitate rather than be facilitated. And for academics and partners, this means having less control on the project's outcomes. So some of the ways in which we've done this is, for example, we might have 6 or 8 groups in a particular project, and we're clear while we're scoping the project that, the value that's going to come out for you is going to come from some of the initial research that we're going to do as academics, some of the research that the students are going to do from this group, and a little bit from this group. Some of the ideas from some of the groups might be usable, but you're going to have to develop them more, etc. So we give kind of space for students to be able to really experiment and fail. And yeah, we want to make sure also that students can integrate different backgrounds, experience, and knowledges into the project delivery and the learning experience. And so what we've been doing is kind of structuring projects that deliver multiple outputs and outcomes, but then kind of using research capacity and, our capacity as academics to bring the projects together, summarize them, pull them together, and kind of deliver something that has value to the partner. And finally, the last principle, and this was really interesting because it kind of emerged from writing the paper. And we realized that what we were doing kind of was hiding the work that we were putting on that. So, we were really careful that there was value for the stakeholders involved, there was value for the partners, there was value for the students. And in all of these relationships, we were forgetting that actually there has to be values for the teaching team and for the academics behind these projects. And that was kind of a really big insight that we had writing this paper. And so what we said was we want to stay in academia as service design researchers and educators and live to tell the tale, and it's really easy to do these projects and burn yourself out completely, because you're responding to and being pulled in so many different directions. And so what we want to make sure of is that we're always allocating resources, validation and evaluation of the project, that we report to different audiences in different formats. And this includes also reporting to an academic audience in the form of academic publications. Also be practice and not just standard KPIs. And so, yeah, basically the why from a pedagogical perspective is that, you know, the entire master's in service design is delivered through live projects, which involve the entire cohort of between 30 and 45 students, depending on the year. And so these are really kind of, it's significantly more time consuming and energy consuming to teach in this way than to teach in the standard kind of getting up and delivering content. And so kind of we also wanted to through this paper advocate for the importance of kind of making sure that we are also building our own careers out of that and not just kind of burning ourselves out throughout the entire project. So we talked a little bit about kind of the principles of how the course was designed. And next, I'm going to talk to you about the structure of how the course was designed. And this is coming up to validation now again next year. So this will all change. But this is what we designed in 2017, and we've been using ever since. So what we have is the master's is 15 months. It works over 4 terms. And the students start with one long 14-week project, and at the same time they have a unit called Ways of Working, which is about is kind of standard service design project. We do a lot about research. We do a lot about understanding and embedding yourself in a community. We do a lot about looking at assumptions and how you might question those assumptions through the research, understanding complex networks of relationships, and then designing a service with it, but always taking an asset-based approach. So it might be building on something that is already there and working, or it might be connecting different things, or it might be creating something. Ways of Working is a unit that is 8 weeks long, and it's really about understanding how to Hello, Male? Are you back
Yes,
in the call?
yes, way back.
Okay, where did you lose me?
We were starting to talk about collaborative or finishing ways of working.
Ways of Working. Okay, cool. I'll just start back from Ways of Working and maybe we can splice it together.
Yeah.
Is it still recording and is it still sharing?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so Ways of Working is a unit in which for 8 weeks students understand how to work in teams, but also how to work in, for lack of a better word, agile ways. So really kind of iterating on projects, being very dynamic in terms of how they work together as a team. In the second term, collaborative unit, this is something that is imposed on us, has to happen in second term. And the problem with it is that we collaborate throughout the entire course, right? So we decided that collaborative unit would be partly a master class in co-design, partly about systems. So we're looking at kind of a bigger scale of projects. We're looking at things with more implications. Then the next unit is Design Futures, and this is also 8 weeks long, and students looking at kind of speculative design, different ways of futures, and kind of linking design with policy making within local government or national government, or we've even done kind of EU government projects before. Then after that, they have a unit called project development, and this is really about them developing a proposal for their major project, which is going to be their kind of long individual project that they scope and they find partners for, and they develop and design all kind of individually. So while user-centered project, ways of working, collaborative unit, design futures is all group work, project development, a major project, our individual projects, even though actually we encourage students to have a non-competitive way of working. So since the very beginning, we make sure that we never put them in competition with each other. And we always kind of emphasize that all the groups are working together, all the teams are working together on one big project. So we're sharing information across. So same thing with a major project. We want to make sure that students are working with each other. If one is having a co-design workshop, they can ask their classmate to come and help facilitate it, and then they'll return the favor, etc., etc. So one of the kind of things that happens is we start off with a lot of structure, and then the amount of structure diminishes as the course goes on. So initially, they'll have kind of more set tasks week by week, and then throughout the units, it becomes more kind of self-directed to the point where major project really it's the students themselves driving the project. They have supervision once a week with a tutor, but really it's the students that have ownership of that project. And so, yeah, as the amount of structure goes down, the amount of autonomy that the student gains goes up. And other principles were kind of scale. So we went from user-centered local projects usually to kind of larger systemic projects. Also time, so from projects that happen in the here and now to projects that happen in futures or might affect futures or are about futures. And then methods really go from how to, so in user-centered project, we're really kind of learning how to service design to more systemic, critical, speculative ways of working. Okay, so here's one more project that we delivered with myself and Male, and I'll talk through this really quickly because I think we're quite a way in. So this was a project where we were asked by the digital teams at UAL to deliver some training because they wanted to change the way in which they commission digital services, and they wanted to make it a lot more student-friendly. And we talked them into including, frontline academic friendly to use, as opposed to kind of buying an off-the-shelf piece of software, which is what we've always had, and then trying to fit it even though it doesn't quite fit. So we were asked to do this training, and what was interesting was we've been asked many times before to kind of do small service design projects within the college or the university. And I've always said no to these because it was always worded in the way that they wanted some students to come and do a couple-week project that would completely change the way in which we deliver X. And the expectation was not right for the level. It was not right for kind of what they expected the impact to be. It was not right for kind of the level of the students, or even exposing the students to kind of their own internal workings. But what we did with this project was a lot more interesting because what they requested of us was kind of a culture change program. So we ran 5 sessions. Oh, there's a video here. Oop. Sorry, I'm gonna have to skip the video, I think. We ran 5 sessions of this project, and we had student facilitators work with us. So we recruited from our current students, 5 students who would come and not only help us facilitate the course, but also help us design the course, help us to design some of the workshops that were within these sessions themselves. And so the students really appreciated being on the other side of kind of teaching and learning were really empowered to kind of see themselves as what they, this is what they do in a professional setting. And also from working with us, and understanding how we put those courses together, what is it that we want to get out of them, what the learning objectives might be. So this was kind of a change-making project, because what we were trying to do was a culture change within the way in which digital services are kind of commissioned, designed, etc., within the university. And what we created in the end was this manifesto, but also the participants worked in teams over 5 weeks. Our students, who were the facilitators of the project, were working in between the sessions with the teams to help them develop a project. Each of the teams developed a project for the final thing that was based in their local department, and we had some really interesting impacts. So within a couple of weeks, we had, for example, the team say, we're designing a policy, and having done this, we understand the value of prototyping, but how would you prototype a policy? And so we had a conversation about that. Another one of the impacts, this was quite big actually, was that out of one of the projects in this training course, it created a new job. So there was user researcher, the first ever user researcher hired to the digital team within the university to shadow students, understand how they use the digital software, understand what their needs might be before commissioning new pieces of software. So these were kind of really big impacts that we thought were indicative of that culture change. Male, I just realized I talked for your bit as well. You're mute.
It's fine. I can continue.
Yeah.
I think what is interesting about this project, and maybe it's linked to the brief now, is that we structure the 4 weeks where we deliver content and sessions and workshops using the double diamond as well. So the same way that students in this transition living lab are creating sessions for sections of the double diamond, we organized the 4 sessions that we did with the organizations and the IT services in the UAL using the double diamond as well. So I think this is interesting. I also wanted to summarize a little bit about change making with the examples that Silvia was sharing. So we are seeing examples of change maker as place making, but also impact in the organizational change in government or in education or in communities. So I think this is how we understand in change making. You found the video. Should I be talking over this video? I think it's not really running. Maybe you just put the next slide. We are working with our home internets, and it's so much we can ask. And to finish, I also wanted to share one last example, because we also developed something that we call responsible pedagogy for this. And it's in the context of the EC Ethical Hub. That is a research hub that create workshops and sessions for organizations trying to support responsible research innovation. So the big change in culture here is that industries developing new technologies. This started particularly in the context of services for emergency response, seeing the ethics of their new product as something that has to be approved the same way of academic ethics works. It has to be pre-approved in the project proposal, and never again is looked at neither at user engagement, neither at user experience, neither at the consequences of future. So we create a workshop that moves from ethics and goes more into responsibility of developing new technologies and innovating in new technologies. And the framework was very successful. It was taken by the European policymakers to evaluate all the innovations produced in the UA now. And as part of this, many particularly industries that were developing or bidding for getting the product out and approved by the standardization process, ask us to develop workshops. So they were expecting us first that we kind of observe the product and give them a certificate that they were ethical. And we come with an approach that is more less involve everybody in the organization, not just at the beginning, not just at the middle, not just at the end, but every stages of the organization, and to think how their practices are responsible. Silvia, you want to pass the next slide? So this is the framework that we develop, and it has some key terms or ethical values, and it has some guidance. But also the bit I wanted to talk is the etiquette, that were these tools for sessions and co-design workshops that we run with many different organizations developing medical health data sharing systems or data sharing systems in emergency or communication radios or iClouds or 5G, and the last projects were about AI. Do you want to put the next slide? So in the etiquettes, we also use the double diamond to structure the engagement. Some of the workshops were 2 days, some of the workshops were 6 months, some of the workshops were a year long. And some of the experience, it also landed in the time of the COVID. So we create all sort of co-design tools that then we could post. So we started to call it etiquette because we were doing these workshops online with materials that each of the participants have already been pre-posted. But we also did in-person workshops, and it was a moment where we were having so much demand that we were also training other researchers to create these workshops with us. So we have a big team at some point thinking what is at the core of our workshops and how is that we work. And from that, we develop a pedagogy of 3 principles. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the type of workshops that we did in person, looking at values particularly and how values are embedded in practices and information sharing and technologies. So we will do a lot of value mapping of systems, and not just include the product or the product development, but society and planet. The next slide, please.
One more or this one?
No, one more, please.
Okay.
So the workshops were usually facilitated for bringing together different actors of that system, of the big people that were involved in that system. And it was something very new in this responsible innovation workshops because it integrate vulnerable communities, industry, policy makings, and the industry developing the products. So the pedagogy that we use to train our trainers and to develop all these workshops ourselves, it has 3 principles. And this is what I wanted to share with you because maybe they are inspiring for your own sessions. The first thing that we thought is how do we integrate? Oh, can you go back, please? How do we integrate art thinking and creativity in the workshops? And this is based, the principle of art thinking is based on a publication of Maria Acaso and Clara Mejias. The publication is in Spanish, but they have plenty of videos in YouTube that are accessible in English. And they have this example of one teacher arrives to the classroom, and instead of usually start to put the lecture and presenting, instead she take a big watermelon and start cutting it in the desk with the shape of a cube in complete silence. What happened in the room was a completely shuffle of dynamics. So the students that usually were very loud and talkative became quiet and observe. The students that usually were in the back and they were more quiet start coming in the front and ask questions. And physical dynamics, like the chairs of the students were pulled apart and all the students came into the front of the desk of the teacher. And the example is given so to think how creative methods, how doing things differently, how integrating playfulness and making in the workshops can shuffle power dynamics within the participants of the workshops. Sometimes we don't know, but if we're running a workshop, for example, with the IT services in the last example, where we have the director of the services and someone that have been 30 years working there and someone that is like just arriving into the team and is very junior, these dynamics of power and who have the bigger voice and who is the most talkative will influence. Not everybody has the same voice or the same power within the co-design workshops. So we were using creative activities. That means that everybody's sitting at the same level. Everybody's sitting and collaborate horizontally. The second, please. The second principle is the principle of meaningful engagement or meaningful participation. That is actually the second principle that we use in the last example of pedagogy for change making. And this is really informed by two people. Pedagogy of the Press by Paulo Freire, also mentioned by Silvia, and Teaching to Transgress from Bell Hooks. And it's really about thinking, again, the power relationships of collaboration. How do we stay vigilant and aware of how these power relationships play out? Who is getting more value? Who is getting, who is not framed in this collaboration? Who is not in the conversation and who should be? Who is getting the best benefit in compensation of what? So really asking critically about how can we make engagements and participation more meaningful in a political way. And the next slide. And the third principle is the principle of ethical anticipation. So all the workshops are future-oriented. We were thinking about alternative to what it is. And we were thinking not just what are the benefits or whatever innovation we're thinking, but what is wrong with them. Usually values are hidden within technologies and practices, and how do we make these values available and in the forefront, and how we change values when the values that are informing some innovation are the wrong values. So we're thinking about change making, particularly with this principle. So we're thinking about future consequences of what we're doing now. And I think there is an alignment on the brief on this one. In the brief, we're using the fourth leg of the Utopias method, and it's about that. It's about imagining together alternative possibilities that bring value for all. And the next slide. Yes, so these are examples of tools that we use for thinking about the future. This is based on a game of Stuart Candy called The Thing from the Future. And there are tools to collectively create scenarios. This particularly is a scenario of emergency because the technologies that we were working with and the companies what we were working with was companies that develop technologies for services emergency response services. Silvia? Will you change the slide, please?
This is the last one.
Ah, perfect. Okay. So I wanted to say that the work that we were doing in this is the last slide. I think that it was a delay. The work that we're doing.
Yeah, there's been quite a bit of delays.
Yeah. The work that we were doing with Easy Ethical, we starting to see that the change that we wanted to make within the organization sometimes was not achievable. We were confronted with the syndrome of it's not my domain, and that was something that we recurrently encounter. So after the workshops and after the interventions, people in industry, people in policy making, they told me, this is all amazing. We have this and this impact, but actually it's not my domain to think about the ethics in society or the ethics for innovative in ecologically. So it was not my domain. And then we started to shift the focus, or at least I started to shift the focus of my role in ethical and create projects that involve communities. I saw structuring publics into having a voice in the future. It was much more productive. And I started thinking about a practice of design or co-design that is very political and spiritual. And maybe this is where this whole challenge come in, because I was thinking about principles of care, of justice, of utopian thinking, and about climate justice, but also how do we create engagements that are much more embodied and grounded. So design has been too much based on visual and writing and paper on tables. How we do embody these values for more than human connectedness. So we need to connect with the earth, with others, with communities, and with physical things. So I started experimented with the use of ceremonies and rituals, and with the use of activities and exercises that are usually rehearsed in political organizations like Extinction Rebellion or nonviolent communication, or spiritual organizations, breathwork, shamanic practice, and ritualistic practice. So I think this is how we came from ethics of technology with corporations into practices in both communities via design, but they are also political and spiritual. And I think you have many examples, and this is quite long, but what we wanted to share is our experience in these projects that are quite complex, but also in terms of principles, there are many aligned principles. I think the learning by doing is one of them. The asset-based approach is key for us, meaningful collaboration and engagement, and how we think in all the system and the people that is engaging with us in the system. I think these are considerations that probably will inform your development of your own interventions. Silvia, you want to say something to close?
No, I think you summed it up quite well. And I think kind of having to think about, not having to, but thinking about the design of the course as in the context of change making was a really interesting exercise, because that was kind of tacitly there all along, but not really expressly shown. So yeah, it was interesting to put the lecture together as well.
Yes, so it was a pleasure, and I hope it was useful for your development and designs. And thank you very much for listening such long stories.
Thank you.
Bye.